I think majority of us are aware of some recent court rulings around just broadly, like broad strokes around like online safety. And I'd say like the responsibility of these massive organizations to that they have a role in ensuring that people are safe in some capacity. And I guess I want to kind of go back because what was it? I guess I'll specifically read this out, but that YouTube is now held liable for harm caused by how their platforms were designed. And it feels a little late to the game, if I'm going to be honest. And it's kind of perfect to have you guys both here. So I'd love to actually first start off with some introduction. So, John Tanagho, Executive Director of the Center of Online Sexual Exploitation of Children and International Justice Mission, a global nonprofit operating in the front lines of digital exploitation worldwide. And then Sharon Pursey, co-founder and CEO of SafeToNet Foundation, head of strategic alliances at SafeToNet, a company behind HarmBlock, AI technology that blocks harmful content at the device level without compromising user security, a strategist recognized for building the corporate and policy alliances that make safety good from the bottom line. So if I may, John, I'd like to first go to you then. If we've had these recent rulings right now that are now holding platforms accountable for how they were ultimately built and the impacts that they're having on their huge user bases. So from your vantage point at IJM, that has there been any sort of groundswell or anything changing in advance of this, or do you feel like these court rulings are going to make an impact? And how broadly can they even reach if it's like the state of California versus like the Supreme Court, and how does that impact also other countries? If you could unpack that a little bit. Sharon, I'd be curious on your end because, we're having this conversation. Basically, we're kind of on LinkedIn, but we're streaming to other platforms as well. And the fact that we're maybe having this conversation on LinkedIn and you're also like having conversations with policymakers and companies and potentially people that can bring in your technology on their end. Do you feel like from a business standpoint or a business kind of direction, do you feel like what are your thoughts around like aligning these objectives with also like business objectives? Like whether, I mean, not even like financially, but just generally, like, is it being received? Are people pushing back? Like what are you seeing?
Well, I think fundamentally, Jackie, keeping children safe should be a moral obligation, should be society's requirement of all organizations and all people. Keeping children safe is the kind of baseline, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's
Well,
such
I
a
guess, can we agree on that? Can we? I mean, but
I
seriously,
know.
because the reason I asked is like, It hasn't happened, and, like, why is it a fight? Why are we going to court? Why are they multi-million-dollar
I
rulings, and,
know.
like, what are we doing?
Well, this is the tragedy of this. And I think what we're finding is that commercialization and, the pursuit of wealth and money gets in the way of keeping children safe. We're also, people's perverted sexual perversions, if you like, are another problem. The motivation for exploiting an innocent child is not a healthy one at all. And the reasons why people do it and facilitate it, we see is, either it's to make money out of it or it's for sexual gratification. And we see these big platforms, these global platforms and devices acting as the facilitators for an enormous business model where children's innocence is commodified and used for sexual gratification at a horrendous at a scale that I really don't think most people have any idea. And even the enormous research that has been done, which is quite limited actually, is a tip of the iceberg.
Well,
And IJM have
can I
done,
pause you
yeah.
there? Like, I mean, what is I mean, 'cause let's talk in facts, like, what is the scale?
Well, I'll let John speak to that.
That's pretty astonishing, those numbers. And just also so when we're also speaking children, I just wanna make like, are we saying anybody that's under 18, is that the expectation here? So it sounds like the technology is there. I mean, Sharon, you've made it. And so it's like, but like also with like these other company, like, do they have the, like, I realize people can, bring in HarmBlock. That's one. Or organizations, do they currently have the capabilities, or if they chose to implement these things? Like, why isn't on some level, like, why isn't already there? Why isn't it the default?
Well, that's a good question. There's no good reason. There's absolutely no good reason. They should have it. They can do it. They can do it, and they just don't. And I think it goes back to pushing against their commercial business model. And also, I think they don't really want to acknowledge that it's happening on their platform. There's reputation situation and that sort of thing. So they're kind of saying nothing here. But absolutely, it's undeniable. Apple already have it in their devices working. Some technology companies do more than others. But I think what we're trying to do now is raise awareness around the art of the possible so that it cannot be denied, and it must be implemented everywhere.
Here, if we want to pause for 1 second, there's two comments in the chat. So I just wanted to share them with you both. And if anybody has anything they want to comment on it. So Armin, security by design starts both at the level of the technology being used and the intended aiming at maximizing dopamine reward, and addictive to say platform to improve ad impact as currency as financial interest. So I think I get it. So Armin's generally saying is that, like, I think he's speaking to like the self-fulfilling prophecy a little bit. It's like there's the technology being used, it's, gives people their high, their hit, and then ultimately they stay addicted to the platform. I mean, ultimately, like, we're talking about addiction on some level, like whether some worse than others.
That's right. But what we're saying is there has to be guardrails,
Right.
just kind of on the Grand Prix racetrack. There are certain guardrails and rules and regulations that must be in place in a situation, in an environment. And what we're saying is that child sexual abuse material is illegal and should never be uploaded, shared, consumed, live streamed ever anywhere online. And the technology exists to prevent that on all the platforms and all the devices. Yes.
God, yeah. Hmm. By location, by city, by,
Mhm.
by who else is in the picture. Yeah. Mhm. That's fantastic. That's right. I gotta tell you, I think that Apple should be highlighting this a little bit more. And if I may, to like kind of like a similar situation, like I do actually think that my I do think that this actually supports the bottom line. And I think the hypothesis I have is that people want to be associated with, like, they have a choice where they spend their money, and you can choose if there's a company that has like like a social good component or not. Like companies that are acting pretty like disgustingly, like, and not spend your money with them. And perfect example actually is Hermes, Axel Dumont. Like, there's some information that came out about him regarding his resistance to even have any association with Jeffrey Epstein. And candidly, I'll tell you, like, I was like, you know what? If the opportunity presents itself, I would love to buy something from Hermes for, because I was like, I like this stance. I want to be associated with like a brand like this. And a friend's 50th birthday is coming up. A number of us pulled some money together, and you know what? I'm waiting for a delivery today for a gift from her from Hermes for that reason. For somebody that actually stands up for not being like a total, stain on humanity on some level. I was like, great, please be better. And I think like people are doing this. I hope Apple talks about this more. I feel like they're not.
So, the difference between the device manufacturers and the platforms and services, if you like, is that device manufacturers, if we embed safety technology into the operating system, we are not pushing against their business model of engagement because they do not generate revenue based on engagement in the ways that platforms and services do. So, that's why looking at the device, another reason why looking at the device is such an interesting use case. When we embed the safety technology, like ours is called HarmBlock, which is designed to detect harmful, sexual, explicit, and illegal imagery, um, into the operating system, it detects it just at that point where the pixels become rendered to the screen. And if it's harmful sexual imagery, it blocks it. Otherwise, everything else just happens as normal. It also stops that type of content being stored on the device or broadcast via the camera. And as you say, that creates a device which is inherently incompatible with child sexual abuse material or explicit content in the case of potentially children, which is a new concept. That this is new, a new use case of this type of technology. And as you say, there is a marketplace of desperate parents, not just in the United States, all over the world, the UK as well. There is a healthy business model for this type of technology, which we are hoping that these device manufacturers will begin to lean into. So, raising awareness around this, along with policy and legislation, will hopefully generate now a new type of safety by design,
Yeah.
safe smart devices. And that could be laptops, it could be tablets, and it could be smartphones. And interestingly, I happen to have on my desk, there's the main child safety charity in the UK is called the NSPCC. And they just had a piece of research they did. Online safety is good for business. And it was just what you said there, Jackie. Consumers are ethically aware these days. We listen to things about environmentally friendly and, anti-slavery and all these things,
Hmm.
and we look out. We like to support brands that are doing good stuff, and we like to work for brands that are ethical. And so I would like to see, some of these big device manufacturers leaning into this and looking for consumers coming to them because they're doing the right thing, employees loving working for them because they do the right thing, because that would start to move the needle back, wouldn't it? We're thinking, what sort of society do we live in now where all this horrible stuff is happening? We'd love to see a movement now towards goodness and, a wholesome
I like that too. I feel like I'm like, how do I package the goodness as financially like advantageous? That's kind of I'm like, hey, you can be good and also make money. That's and actually, if I may, either Kate Randall in the thread, she asks, what do you think incentivized Apple to incorporate those preventative measures, and why do you think other tech companies won't? And then there's actually, let me also mention one more comment because they kind of tied together, but they kind of, they dispute each other a little bit. So, Jonathan Taylor, no website, app, or site has ever been made to be dangerous. I have my thoughts on that, but okay. It all happens as a result of behavior. So, perhaps it's unsafe by behavior. So, I don't know if you guys would like to respond to any of those. I haven't seen it, but I mean, I'm not sending those type of photos. So I'm like, I don't know if it like pops up when something like that happens or.
Mm. Ours.
Well,
Mm.
yeah. Yes. Let me put that in the chat. I want everybody, if you can go, everybody, it's free. So if you're in the area, go check it out. It looks like a great event.
Thanks.
No, I think it's a great objective, and even before that happens, it's like I think sitting in this conversation with both of you, we're all relatively aligned. And I mean, even for anybody that's listening live or after we publish, it's like we all have opportunities. We have choices where we spend our money. We have choices with the companies that we work with, and potentially like how we're driving products to market, and what we can do to like specifically technology. If you're a product designer or a product owner, you can implement this into like the product rollout. Like this is one of the
Yeah.
things that we are doing. So I think we don't even have to own a company. We don't have to be Mark Zuckerberg. We can start something like as individual contributors within all of our organizations. One thing I want to ask, like, have you and I don't know if more broadly, like companies that say can companies or should companies also be implementing this for like their employee owned devices? Because I can only imagine, like my head goes to like what a huge like lawsuit or like a huge liability ultimately, like if you are not on some level locking down devices so that ultimately the company isn't on the hook for something. It just feels like a huge risk.
Reputation risk,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, that is one of the it's very interesting when we go around the world and we talk about this capability to big enterprise and also policymakers, the great and the good, on how they receive that and what their vision is and how they would see that being rolled out. And we certainly, when we visited Texas about a month ago, we had that exact conversation on enterprises and government procured devices that are paid for with taxpayers' money. You can see why that would be an absolute no-brainer. All laptops, devices, tablets should be incompatible with this sort of illegal child sexual exploitation material. And so as we go to all the different markets, we're able to share those learnings. So in the UK, we talk to our government and on big enterprise banks. You can imagine the last thing they want is with their amazing brand, which is so valuable, Hermes, for example. Can you imagine the last thing they want after all the effort they make to, do the right thing is
God,
for
yeah.
somebody in their leadership team to let them down in this way, for it to be in the press. So that could be a great way for this sort of technology to be adopted. Imagine one of the big laptop manufacturers, Microsoft or Dell or HP or whatever, Mac, embedding this type of tech into their laptops and making it impossible for people to do that sort of thing while they're at work. That
Yeah,
would make sense.
absolutely. I wonder if I mean, so let me ask you this. Is this technology or the ability to potentially block, is this focused on imagery only, or is there anything around like text and words? Does that play into like, I mean, we have AI, it's can be contextual. It gets a lot of things wrong, but for example, I think at the top of the hour, John, you had mentioned something about the grooming part of it. And I don't know, like in my brain, grooming kind of starts potentially from like words, not necessarily images. So, like, technology or somewhat like implementing these safeguards, does it include words or contextualizing words?
Okay, so we work with a government organization in the UK called the Internet Watch Foundation, because there are very few organizations around the world that are allowed to store illegal child sexual exploitation material. Now, they do have text, which sometimes, as they capture this horrendous content, it's sometimes contained within text. But we only use the imagery and millions of these images to train our image classification tool. But there, in the future, we can add other modes of, if you like, context. And the text is definitely adds context. So we're looking at the image itself, we're looking at the child, we're looking at things like age. There's various um, criteria that we look at, and text could be added to that. The challenge with text is the language. And so this is a global social problem. And in order for it to be super scalable, image works really well because it's kind of doesn't have borders. The minute you start adding language into this, although there are ways of translating, but it slows down the process, it becomes less scalable. But multimodal is definitely looking at various different modes improves accuracy because it's saying, well, is there a bed? Is it dark? Is there an adult and a child? So not just looking at the image, but adding other context helps us improve accuracy. And that's an ongoing process for us. But initially it's image and video, which allows us then to interpret in live stream.
Yeah, the autocorrect. Yeah. Mhm. That's right. The I mean, the only constant is change is, like, let's be real. I mean, and we go back to even to, like, the seatbelt example. It's like, there was a period of time where people didn't that seatbelts didn't come in cars, and now today, I can't even imagine not putting my seatbelt on. It's just so weird. Let me ask you this, is based on the the things that have already been implemented and the progress that has been made, have there been do we have facts or data? Like, have there been improvements, or is just there have been more things popping up to fight? Like, I guess my how am I trying to say this? That's a clunky question. Based on the existing trends in making technology safer and what's been done already, has it had an impact on reducing or improving the stats around exploitation or any of these variety of things that we've been discussing?
So, Jackie, this is brand new technology in terms of we have one device so far that has launched in the market, and that is a manufacturer that you've probably never heard of. It doesn't exist anymore in the States. It's HMD Nokia. You've probably heard of the Nokia brand.
Yes.
They have launched one phone in the UK and Australia, and that is the only phone so far in the world that contains this technology, and that phone is incompatible with CSAM and explicit imagery. So we have a lot of work to do to raise awareness on this and get it into more and more devices, which we are doing, safe to net. And and I suppose the sad reality is what's been happening in the world of online safety by holding the platforms and services to account is we are still seeing a horrendous increase of harms against children, of sextortion and children being exposed to harmful sexual content, children being sexualized from a young age, growing up and not understanding what pornography is, and they're getting it in their feeds. So there is
Those
so
things
much to be.
totally concern me. I mean, it's like the technology, the imagery, it's recent. I think it was maybe just yesterday, at least from Los Angeles United School District. They actually made, I saw some article, who knows, a headline around just broadly reducing devices in schools and making a point of going back to pen and paper, which,
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, the exposure to all this stuff, it's just inroads to, yeah, well, I'm kinda curious to see what's gonna happen in our neighborhood, but we'll see.
Mean, in the UK, there's just been legislation passed to stop the phones, children from bringing their phone into school, and so phones are being gathered and stored for children under 16. And there's lots, I think our parents are so desperate that we're seeing all these different things playing out all around the world in different ways. But I think it's a Swiss cheese approach, if you like. All the
Right.
cheese layers have got holes in them, but ideally we layer them on top of the other. And for some children, their parents may feel that they shouldn't have a device at all. And I've got 4 kids, and I totally respect a parent's decision to do what they feel is right for their own family. For those that they do want to give a device at whatever age that might be, we feel it should be a safer device, one that can actually block and stop that child from viewing sexual imagery. And so kind of I think what we're hoping to see is, as you mentioned, what impact are we seeing? Not enough at the moment. I mean, not enough, but what we're hoping to bring now is more impactful solutions through, I feel that this is much more bulletproof. Embedding into the operating system and being on the device is a
100%.
very impactful way of stopping people from viewing harmful, explicit content.
Anybody that's listening live on LinkedIn, we're getting towards the end, so if anybody has any follow-up questions that you may wanna add to the chat, please do so. In the meantime as well, I'd be curious to see, like, we mentioned Australia and just how impressive it looks like their efforts and initiatives. Are there any sort of, like, small examples across the globe that you think are, like, you would like to share, like, what they're doing? Like, I mean, I feel like, we have our blinders on here. I'm like, I don't know what other people are doing and if there's learnings to bring over here potentially.
So we have an amazing Lord in our House of Lords called Lord Nash, Lord John Nash, who has got such a heart for this. And he has proposed a bill to mandate that all new phones are incompatible with this child sexual exploitation material. And that it should have technology that gets embedded into the operating system that prevents it from being able to render to the screen or store or broadcast via the camera any sort of explicit imagery of children. And so that has received actually quite a high profile in the UK. It's been discussed very publicly. And in our government, we have two ministers that are responsible for safeguarding, Jess Phillips and the AI minister, Minister Narayan. So they have publicly acknowledged to Lord Nash that they will take this concept on board, but go wider and deeper. I actually spoke to DCIT today, and that's making great progress. John, you'll be interested to hear. We don't know yet how that's going to manifest, whether it's going to be all devices in the UK or just, for children or for adults, or, how that works. But we're definitely going to see a bold piece of legislation coming to fruition here. And I don't know whether it'll be the Online Safety Act or the Police and Crime Act, we don't know. So that's very exciting. And so what John and IJM and SafetyNet, what we do is we watch the domino effect of policy around the world, because when we see it in, say, the UK or Canada or the United States or Australia or the Philippines, it gives the other governments confidence then to pick up this legislation, but maybe deploy it in a way that suits them or works for their country. And so we try to raise awareness and share the learnings. So in the UK and in Australia, John and I were there a couple of weeks ago. We're sharing to the Australian MPs what's happening in the United States, and connecting them all up so that we can give confidence for them to actually legislate. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, children can't consent, so there's that.
Yes.
See, and so this is kind of an extension of a question from Armin in the chat. I'm going to change his question a little bit because part of the question also was like ideas on punishing people watching this. The reality is, I feel like that's a little bit beyond like the scope right now of our conversation. But I do want to ask. I don't know if you have information statistically or just by your own, by your own inference. Do you believe that kind of stopping the release of or accessibility or the availability of this content, do you feel like this will help the people that are potentially like going down this path or potentially seeking that higher high? Like, will it in the long run kind of curb the end user or the end creator of this type of content?
Yeah. Yeah.
God. Yeah, you look around a little bit, you're like, "What is happening?" Like, "What?"
That's right.
Mhm. Oof.
I think, John, we've got to protect that's right, we've got to protect our little boys, because there's a very dangerous pathways, I think, particularly for boys, our children. They're being fed this content and it's just in their feeds on their social media and they're just going down this really toxic pathway. And we have to stop it because that's how they inadvertently end up in that situation and they're almost victims in their themselves. So we have to stop that. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Prevention. 100%.
That's right. So did I.
We're like, "What were you doing then? Are you guys crazy?" I welcome that. Let's do it. I love it. If a founder, a corporate leader, or a parent watching this could do one thing differently starting tomorrow, what would you say?
Well, I would say if you go to buy a device, whether it be a smartphone, a tablet, or a laptop, if it doesn't have technology like this embedded into it and it's safe in that way, turn round and walk out.
I love it. And that's a great way. Yeah, absolutely. I think that with our purchasing power as an individual corporation, like you can protect yourself and your family and your employees from a whole slew of different
That's
things that
right.
could be problematic. I did put in the chat and I'll put it in the meeting notes or the episode description, the event that IJM is having. Firming, I just want to confirm that it's on June 1st in Washington, D.C. It is a free event where you can actually meet with some of your representatives. And then um, I'd love to plug next week, there is a mastermind event for anybody that wants to attend. We talk about, broader ideas that each of us as individuals are working on. I'd love to potentially see people that are working on brands or businesses and everything that have like, it's like a tech for good component. So I'd love to invite you. I'd love to hear your take and like what you're working on and how you're getting there. And if there's anything that we can do to support you, I'd love to. John or Sharon, both of you, is there anything that you'd like to, I guess, promote or pitch or encourage? Please go follow both of my guests on LinkedIn and other platforms. I think you guys are doing good. I'm seriously, I mean, I mentioned it before we started going live. Like, I don't think I could do this work without crying every single day. So, like, I'm just so thankful to know that there are people that like you that are working on this, and it's like making it easy for myself as the end user potentially to like implement this technology or think about it a little bit differently for myself as well as my entire family. Well, and to your point, it's like sometimes you're like, well, what can I do? It feels like such a huge problem. Well, these are specific things that you can do. Sharon, is there anything else, anything that you wanted to?
Well, maybe, to what you said about enterprise, start asking your employer, it doesn't just have to be policy. I think this is something, as you say, it can be where we work, it can be our consumer behavior. Let's kind of start asking and demanding for a safer world to live in. Let's start, resetting the world that we live in and make it a better one, a safer one.
Absolutely. John, Sharon, thank you so much for talking about Unsafe by Design. I'm going to say bye to the audience right now. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you for the questions. And please, again, go follow John and Sharon, myself. Look forward to seeing you at future events.